You know what my husband said about the news. He called it the first rough draft of history. That's good, isn't it?
I was minding my own business, making Ready Player One, with no intention of doing anything until Ready Player One was in theaters, when I was given a script called The Post by Liz Hannah. And I put off reading it because I just didn't need the temptation. But I read it on a weekend, and I remember going, oh, I'm doomed. This is, oh no, this is not good for me. The premise and the critical study and the beautiful personal portrait of Katharine Graham that Liz rendered in her draft was enough to get me to say, I might be crazy, but I think I'm gonna make a movie right now. Tom, you should be there. That's great. And then I can pan up to Tom like this.
That's great.
That's like that.
That's very.
This has been a very surreal experience from the very beginning. We sat down with Liz Hannah in 2014, maybe, 2015. We were a big fan of her writing, and we thought we'd love to find a project to do with you. And she had said that she was a big fan of Katharine Graham, and she had read the book Personal History.
About 6 or 7 years ago, I read Kay's memoir, and I kind of became obsessed with her, and I just couldn't get her out of my head. I kept thinking about her and thinking about, well, what is this movie? And it didn't really occur to me that it was this point in her life until I read Ben Bradley's memoir.
Can I ask you a hypothetical question?
Oh, dear, I don't like hypothetical questions.
Well, I don't think you're gonna like the real one either.
Do you have the papers?
Not yet.
And I realized that this was the story of the two of them, that the decision to publish the Pentagon Papers was really the moment in her life where she chose to be the person she was going to be.
I have a really great executive who works for me named Ben, and he's very aggressively tracking things around town. And he came across this script that had gone out by Liz, and Ben enterprisingly got a copy of it, gave it to me on a Friday afternoon, and by Friday at midnight, I owned it. Stephen called me, it was around the weekend of the Academy Awards, to tell me he'd read the script and he was thinking about it.
Just rehearse those two lines right now when you say one.
Myself and Meryl and Stephen read it all about the same time. And I said, well, if he's gonna do it, I'd love to be involved in this. And I read it and counted it up, the scenes I had with Meryl. How many do I have with Meryl? How many times am I gonna get to have that opportunity? We read this in February or March, and our first day of shooting was the 1st of May. That's very fast for a movie to come together. And it doesn't happen unless Stephen jumps.
So from a script that perhaps people might be interested in, it became something that was going to happen. It was going to happen in the next 3 weeks, and get ready. So I did all my research that I possibly could. They also brought on Josh Singer, who wrote Spotlight, wonderful, wonderful screenplay writer, and he and Liz enhanced it, and the script became even richer and even more compelling.
I had known Josh because he had done a couple of films for my company, and I sent the material to Josh, and he really responded to Liz's script. And we got very fired up about the possibilities of where the story could go.
Liz's draft was a great roadmap and was really an incredible spec. I've never seen anything like it, really. So for me, a lot of what I was trying to do was actually track the history, because the history of events in these 2 weeks is breathtaking. And then just expand the world, right? Get a feeling for the larger world that is around these people.
So it all sort of fell into place, as if this project in 2017 was kind of meant to happen.
We've got really amazing characters, great dialogue, and a very compelling story, but it took someone like Stephen, who there's only one of out there, to really turn it into this cinematic, kind of very epic film.
I am going to just ask Mr. Hanks to give us just a little send-off at the beginning of this movie. I usually customarily do it, and I would like this time to defer to Mr. Bradley.
All right. All motion pictures are documents somehow. They're historical documents as go down as of the record of how we lived and how we thought about our times. Never has there been a period picture that has been more tied into the actual events of the day than our little enterprise right now. So, a toast to filmmaking and a toast to telling the truth as much as possible. God bless.
Let's use this Steadicam for one thing. Okay. Let's use this Steadicam for this one.
All these actors were absolutely panicked because this was one of those movies where you couldn't pretend it wasn't a big deal. You're looking at a call sheet going, it's Meryl Streep and it's Tom Hanks and it's this one, it's that one, it's Steven Spielberg and Janusz and all these incredible people in every department. And it was impossible not to feel apoplectic about the whole thing. And I know everyone felt this way. And so that was sort of comforting. A camaraderie on set was everyone was talking about how much they had been awake the night before.
Who's terrified? Who? We're all terrified. Petrified. Scared out of our minds.
The first scene I did was the scene where I had lines with a bunch of the guys.
Didn't you crash the wedding of Nixon's other daughter to get a story?
Well, I did get a story, but I didn't crash Julie's wedding. There was so much going on in that scene that I didn't have enough time to be nervous about it. I just had to concentrate and make sure I was saying my lines, and everybody was so kind and just kind of guided me along.
My first day on set was the day before we started shooting, and it was a day of camera tests for Meryl and for Tom. And I had to come in to take some photos, and Steven said really lovely things. And then Meryl took my face in her hands and said, look at you handsome thing, and gave me a motherly hug, and we talked about how we resembled each other, and now a day at work is just a regular day. I still have moments where I'm realizing who I'm talking to, but the fact that it feels so normal is a real testament to the work that they do to make you feel normal and allow you to thrive in that environment.
My very first day was a scene with just Meryl and I. She and I are in the living room, and I'm just giving her a real hard time. So it's a really fun scene. It's a really wordy scene and a very fast-paced scene. I certainly felt incredibly nervous. And then Meryl Streep walks on set, and she's just so wonderful. Any anxieties I had evaporated immediately because I thought, oh, good. I can just listen and react to Meryl. As long as I'm present and just in the scene with her, it's gonna go okay.
And just sitting there in the makeup trailer on the first day, and we were tweaking my wig or something, crack of dawn, and I'm chatting away to the makeup artist. Tom jumps out of the chair and goes, Bruce, hey man, great to have you here. And just a mensch, you know, just a very open, energetic, nice guy.
I just want to thank you all for coming out this evening.
I had a voiceover part in AI, and that was not as satisfying. This experience, this was the real deal, because I always admired his films, but I was never asked to dance before, and so I was just thrilled that he was gonna direct this.
That's great, right? That's great.
I was completely unprepared for how free he is as a filmmaker. He's so in command of his art that it's just, I won't say it's effortless because he works very hard, but we came in there, no rehearsal. That really shocked me. You just go in and start shooting. And then he'll just mix everything up. He says, you know, no, I'm gonna do something different here. We're just gonna toss this up and start in a different place. And it was just so spontaneous, really thrilling.
That was great. That was really, really good. Good, really fun. One more time. I didn't force the film into a pre-order. I didn't have a plan or a vision. In terms of where I put the camera, I kind of played it by ear, which was really fun for me when I could do that, because so many other movies I do storyboards and I get very involved in pre-visualizations. And I just made a very, very complicated special effects picture. And suddenly I felt that I was free again.
I dropped by when I wasn't working, and I could have a peek at the monitor. And there's a scene where Ellsberg is in his hotel room, and Bagdikian has just gone up there to grab the boxes of papers. And there was a shot where you can see Ellsberg underneath his arm.
He would say to us, let the chips fall where they may.
When you stand back and you watch him set those shots up, you go, wow, that's beautiful.
You don't see them at all, and then this continues blocking them, but then you see them here. I did this shot in 1980 on Raiders of the Lost Ark. Josh pointed it out.
The thing that's extraordinary about Steven and filmmakers from his generation is that they're one of the last generations that's really cutting in the camera. They were educated in the medium of film, and so he's incredibly efficient because he knows exactly what he needs. And we actually don't do that many takes, which is something I was really surprised and impressed by.
He's incredibly funny and incredibly inquisitive. just asking me a million questions, everything from like our favorite flavor of jelly bean to world peace, which is why I think his movies are so wonderful, because they're filled with such nuanced detail about human behavior, which is what I think impacts you most as a viewer, is when you see yourself up there in some way.
Working with Steven, there are more than your fair share of goosebump moments. And they come from everything from when he says that was a nice line, to just watching him work and seeing the innovation, the improvisation. I've never seen anything like it. He will connect ideas with the camera. I mean, he had this idea of you're behind Kay Graham, and there's this one long tracking shot that will tell the story of the whole movie from her point of view.
How are you, Kay?
Hello, everyone.
He's always making things bolder, and so watching that has just been extraordinary.
That was great. He's a great regulator of the tempo and the timbre of a scene. He will ignore moments that you think are important and come in specifically on moments that you didn't even see as being all that necessary, because he's looking at some other aspect of the scene. He would come up to me and he would ask for a little more voice. He would ask for some other kind of specifics, but he would also then periodically come by and say, "Don't be so sure of yourself." I said, wow, I love that. Not so sure. Or other times say, don't say anything, just watch and observe. And a lot of times that's the antithesis of what actors want to do, the perfection of what can be screen acting, because then you're just being as opposed to pontificating.
I think the only way this is going to work is if we start shooting it until we like it. I just find making movies to be kind of a team collaborative effort. It's not an autocracy. It really is gathering the best ideas together to tell the best type of story. And I had the most amazing collaborators on this one.
There's dozens of stories in here. The Times has barely scratched the surface. We have 10 hours till the deadline, so we dig in.
One of the things that I think is the strongest about this film is the beauty of it, because it's a film that takes place in offices and at dinner parties. And how to make that interesting is what Janusz has brought. How to make that compelling and, in a way, propulsive, to make the story so you can't wait to see what happens next. I think that's Steven, obviously. But together they work seamlessly, those two. They see with the same pair of eyes.
Is the center sharp? Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, we got the good one. If we don't like it, if it's too much, then we can just... And he's not at the step. When he goes forward, it's going to get slightly less.
Steven and myself, we prefer the traditional way of making movies. Traditional way meaning using 35mm cameras and using regular lights and using 35mm film stock.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we have Buzz turn on the paper?
For me, my aim was through my photography not go towards the 70s, because I felt the story feels so relevant that if you splatter all that 1970 time frame on the picture, the movie may not be relevant. And so consequently, I was using a lighting style that normally I wouldn't use for a movie that takes place in such a period, and aiming to achieve some sense of reality through the lighting, through the composition, and through the world that we've created, a reality that is relevant to what's happening right now.
This movie is about reflecting back on our history, and Janusz and Steven together figured out how they would show reflections in the newsroom and reflections of Ben Bagdikian's character in the payphone when he goes to make that phone call. And I think those things really helped us tell our story in a better way.
I grew up in Poland, and we were fascinated by American cinema of the 1970s. So I was very familiar with that vocabulary. There are scenes that I played a little bit of homage towards that style of filmmaking. And there's one particular scene where Bob is on the phone, and we just brought the camera a little bit further away from him. There is a very brutalistic architecture around him. So it was just so instinctual and so natural to just go that direction and make it very graphic, with lines of the buildings crossing the frame and putting a 1970 police car driving through the frame, and not using lights, just using natural light for that particular scene. A little bit of a homage to the movies that I love so much.
Ben, there are concerns here that are frankly above your pay grade.
And then there's one particular shot for Meryl when she's on the phone using the descender rig, where the camera starts high up in the air, looking down at Meryl as she's listening and having conversation on the telephone, and the camera descends and rotates around her several times.
I'm gonna need the big monitor in my hand. Okay.
But yet again, when you see the movie, you don't have the sense that it's a gimmicky shot. It just feels appropriate for the drama of the scene.
On one of the days we were working, there was a cake waiting for us on set. One of the PAs standing there said, "Hey, do you want some cake for Kay's birthday?" And I thought they meant Meryl, because a lot of times we are called by our characters' names. Well, it wasn't Meryl's birthday, it was Kay Graham's 100th birthday.
Katharine Graham, had she lived, would have turned 100 during the production of the film. So we had this huge birthday cake of the Washington Post, of the paper on the cake, and Will Graham came to represent the family. We are so appreciative of having the privilege to actually be here to recreate a very significant part of your grandmom's life.
In addition to cake, we also each got a complimentary subscription to the Washington Post. But what's most important about this gift is the message and the spirit in which it was given. To love what you do and feel that it matters, how could anything be more fun? Katharine Graham said this about her newsroom. I could just as easily say it about making this film. Here's to Kay on her 100th birthday, and here's to you for being here to celebrate it. Thank you, Steven. This really just summarizes the spirit with which Steven Spielberg moves through the world, and I can't think of a more appropriate person to celebrate this extraordinary woman. And we were all very lucky to be there on this day and to be here to make this film.
Gentlemen, thank you all for helping make the Washington Post a more robust company.
For me, Steven has always had very strong women in his movies. Obviously, Kate in Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom, Marion Ravenwood in Raiders of the Lost Ark, Dee Wallace in E.T., Gertie in E.T., The Color Purple, and now with this story, Katharine Graham. It's pretty remarkable.
Frankly, they're concerned about your ability to turn a serious profit.
There's a scene in the movie that every woman who's ever been in a meeting in their life just died over, and that is that you're sitting in the board meeting, you have all the information, you can't open your mouth, and when you do, it's as though no one sees you, people talk right over you, you give the answer, no one hears you, someone else says it, they hear them, and believe me, I ran a company pretty recently, and it was exactly the same, and they all worked for me. Kay talks about that a lot in her book, how people would look right through her. And for a long time, she didn't think anything of it. Once you take a stand in life, you face yourself, you become something. She became something that day.
This is no longer my father's company. It's no longer my husband's company. It's my company.
On my last day, we had an opportunity to celebrate all the women working on this movie. They had us all get together and take a photo with all the women working in every capacity on the film, the crew, producers, actors. It was really cool because there were so many.
We realized that there were more women than men on the set, which I think this is the first time that that's ever happened on a movie that I've worked on. We felt Katharine Graham's spirit at work in getting all of us to work together.
I love being surrounded on the set every single day by Amy Pascal, our great producer, Chrissy McCosco, our great producer, Liz Hanna, who was on the set at least half the time supporting us, and this whole great company of actresses. I mean, it was really fun.
We were shooting the Supreme Court coming down with their decision to allow the newspapers to print the Pentagon Papers. So all the reporters were there, all the front office people, Meryl, Tom. It was a fairly large group of this cast back together again. At Columbia University, doubling for the Supreme Court.
There are protests happening, and there must have been 200 extras or something, and just the attention to detail was incredible.
There's a way in order to have the last day of a movie, and that's about as good as you get. Ton of extras, magical setting. Somebody else is doing all the work. All we really had to do was sit there, you listen. And even there, Steven found something that was brand new, that wasn't in the screenplay. He concentrated women on this one little path, and Kay Graham walks down through that path, and every one of the women had their eyes directly on her, because at the end of this story, it's about her. It's not even about what happened inside, it's about something else. A perfect final day on what I think was about as perfect a movie-making experience as I've ever had.
This has been the greatest ensemble experience of my entire life. I have never had an ensemble cast like this, under one roof, between four walls. I don't finish, and the crew doesn't finish until Sunday at like 3 a.m. However, this is the last shot on all of you. Meryl, my God, I've been trying to work with you for all my life. Thank you, and God bless all of you for sharing this experience with me.
Here's to the king.
To the gov. To the gov.
Everyone was just kind of looking around like, did he just say that? Just felt extremely special, and I think everyone was just proud to have made him proud, you know?
I was not alone in being really moved by Steven's generosity and warmth and celebration of this project. It was really a powerful and wonderful experience.
Who's the long hair? That's Ellsberg. Works for Lansdale at the embassy. He's observing.
When we were trying to just learn more about the Pentagon Papers, Stephen invited me to a meeting with Daniel Ellsberg and his wife. And that's where I heard for the first time that he was in fact a Marine, and he had gone to Vietnam many, many times.
With the research, you're constantly going through pictures and reading material. The sequence in Vietnam is based all on meticulous truth. There was a firefight that Ellsberg got caught up in because he became this strange character in the Vietnam War. He was meant to be witness, he was meant to report on the war. But then he was out on patrol, they armed him, and he wasn't a legitimate soldier, he was a former Marine, so he became this strange entity in the Vietnam War where he was taking pictures and engaging the enemy himself.
So he had practical experience in the field, fighting the Viet Cong at night. So knowing that that was there, I think Stephen's eyes lit up and said, well, how can you capture a movie about the Pentagon Papers, which is all about American involvement in Vietnam, without going to Vietnam?
We are in Purchase, New York, about an hour outside New York City, which is hard to believe. You would never know you're not in a different country. We have our military advisor. He's got everyone assigned to what they'd be doing for battle, getting ready for patrolling tonight. And that's gonna take us to our big Vietnam ambush that Ellsberg's involved with. We came out here, we scouted the location, and we blocked it out with all the stunt guys, and we have people going down, we have people taking fire, people taking cover. We have 15 stuntmen. We have some of them are VC, Viet Cong, and then about 11 Marines. We had Matthew Rhys out yesterday, and it's always a concern that the actor may be at a different level than the stunt guys, but he's absolutely one of the best performers. He knows the weapons. He was falling, he was crawling around, so he did a great job.
I was very surprised that we were able to recreate the Vietnam White Plains. But I actually did look at some Vietnam documentary footage, but yet I felt I didn't want to recreate that. My approach was more like what we remembered from Vietnam, rather what the Vietnam actually looked like.
She says we publish.
Hot damn.
My God.
Holy shit.
Let's get this out.
Because of social media and how malleable it is and how much truly false information is out there, we are now wrestling, I think, more so than ever with the concept of what a free press is.
We all felt that this is a relevant story to tell now because our First Amendment rights are being challenged and the Fourth Estate is being labeled fake news. And this was the time to extol the great virtues of a free press. And we felt that was one of the things our film could help to engage or re-engage this country in an honest conversation about the massive contributions that the press makes to a free nation.
The way they lied. The way they lied. Those days have to be over.
I came here for values that the country represents, and we're beginning to lose those values. I think this movie brings that importance of honesty and free press to the light.
This movie is in a long line of movies that are about people who take great risks to tell the truth, and they are the heroes.
The press is not supposed to be patting our leaders on the back. The press is not supposed to be singing praises. The press is supposed to be tough. That's their job. Their job is to keep the president honest, to keep the government honest.
You have a powerful story on your hands when you realize that everybody wants to be a part of it. We had to make this movie this year, right now. It's timely. It was the right thing to do, and it just came about in the right way.
It's kind of subversive how multiple stories are told at the same time through the narrative of this historic moment and the march to justice. And really, her taking a stance at a time when it was very difficult for her to do that. But everybody in this film does that. Every single person has risk attached to the decision that they make. And that, more than anything, is what I think people will feel, how just ordinary people can really change the course of history.
A lot of my films will have an epilogue that sort of rises up, and Bridge of Spies had it, and Lincoln had it. But this time I wanted to kind of jump ahead in time, just a couple of years, to show the Watergate break-in, because in a way it follows. Without the Pentagon Papers, I don't think the Washington Post would have had the street credibility or the internal moxie to have allowed Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward to go as far as they did, following the money trail, which eventually led to Nixon's resignation.
Without the Pentagon Papers, without that definitive fight and that definitive judgment over the First Amendment, Watergate might never have happened, and the Nixon administration might not have reshaped the whole aspect of what the power of the White House is.
DC Police, 2nd Precinct.
Yes, hello, this is Frank Wills. I think we might have a burglary in progress at the Watergate.
The New York Times spent 3 months going over these documents.
Why don't you say Ben and join Clark, so you're two against one.
Okay,
So
yeah.
A lot of the historical films I've made, the people are no longer living. You know, there's nobody I could interview for Lincoln. But in this case, a little bit like Bridge of Spies, there were descendants. There were people who were part of that extraordinary time in 1971, and we benefited from it. We benefited from getting to know Don Graham and his son Will. We benefited by getting to know Lolly Weymouth and Daniel Ellsberg and principals of that era who changed the course of history.
For me, this movie, it tells the story of the Pentagon Papers. It tells the story of Kay Graham and Ben Bradley's relationship. It tells the story of Kay Graham. But the thing that holds it all together are these relationships and these characters and the really true dynamic that these people had with each other.
No matter what happens tomorrow, we are not a little local paper anymore.
It's been really amazing to see the two of them. I mean, I knew from the beginning Meryl was going to know more about Kay than I did, right? Because she was starting roughly the same time as I was, and she's brilliant. And, you know, I think she's read and seen more. And similarly with Tom, he knew Ben a little bit, you know, and Stephen knew Ben quite well, which I think is very useful.
I cannot imagine anybody else playing Katharine Graham. The way Meryl Streep acquitted the nature of her character and plumbed the depths of her life in under 2 hours. I don't know how Meryl did it, and I'm the director.
We had a lot of archival material to draw upon to look at how to present Katharine Graham. Katharine Graham was very, very tall. That's one thing that gave her a sort of patrician grace and a bearing that was intimidating to some people, even as self-conscious as she was. She presented in a certain way that was distinct and important, so we worked hard to try to get that. But it wasn't as important to try to look like her as it was to capture something of her personal grace.
Thank you, Arthur, for your frankness.
There was a tentativeness backstage to her decisions, and then in meetings and things she would try to present in a very different way. That was an interesting challenge.
My husband, Tracy Letts, said in a speech when he had the privilege of giving Meryl an award one evening, and he said, "The mistake we make about somebody like Meryl is assuming that she's somehow magical. In fact, what Meryl Streep is an incredibly hard worker."
There's not a moment in which she is not reacting to you. She is bouncing off of everything that you give her, and she's trying to find the moment along with you. And in that way, you cannot do wrong. And that, well, man, that's the high country, man, when you're working with somebody like that. Why is he talking to you?
Well, I just told you he's my friend. And...
Oh, is he talking to any other friends?
This is the 5th film Tom and I've made as an actor-director partnership. And Tom continues to surprise me every time we work together. It's kind of like I didn't know he had this character in him. We got 10 hours till deadline. Dig in.
That's it. We got 10 hours to dig in. Let's dig in.
Let's dig in. Dig in.
There's a lot of information on Ben Bradley, not the least of which has come from his autobiography himself. Luckily, there's tons of film on Ben. He gave an awful lot of interviews because after Watergate, he became a much sought-after guy in order to talk about that era. There's millions of people who worked with him that I was able to talk to, and also Sally Quinn, his wife. She and I had a number of great conversations.
Sally said, you know, Ben had this phrase, he loved to say, my God, the fun, which was the essence of his personality as an editor. The fact that he could be a hard-hitting journalist and editor and still be able to stop in the middle of a story and say,
my God, the fun.
And another favorite word Sally said of Ben's was retromingent, which we got a chance to use one time.
Not true. I give one rat's ass.
Yeah.
One retromingent. Rat's his ass.
I think it means an animal that can only piss backwards.
I understand you did a big close-up of me, looking at Meryl off camera. That's the one sheet? That's right. With the new title, What You Gonna Do, Kay?
My greatest appreciation of Tom started before we were shooting, because all the reporters, 7 or 8 of us, I think, all got together at his place in New York. He had this big lunch, and we all read it, and we got to know each other, and he sort of spearheaded that. That was his thing.
It ends up being a good thing because then, months hence, when we're showing up to work on the first day, we actually know each other in the hair and makeup trailer. We're not introducing each other, trying to find it on the set. Save it for the afternoon. I need Chow and Judith.
Judith!
There are a lot of characters, and it's also very timely. So I think everybody felt very passionately about this story being told right now.
Ellen Lewis, who had done Bridge of Spies with us, she came on and she cast the movie, and she just did an excellent job. We got every cast member we wanted.
All my first choices were available, and the few that weren't, we worked out the dates with the producers on the projects they were currently engaged with, and so it all sort of fell into place.
This is probably the most unusual film that we've made for various reasons. Primarily, I would say that the amount of actors that had tremendous significance every time they spoke.
And action.
Mr. Bagdikian. When I am casting real people, what I am looking for is an essence of the person. I'm not looking to cast lookalikes.
I need to know your source.
I think now with cable and the amount of programming that is available, it has opened the floodgates for actors, one, to work a lot more, which is great, but also for us to now be watching television to see what actors we're seeing on television that we can use in films.
Why don't you cut your bangs?
Mommy,
a little bit.
I'm right in the middle. It certainly feels like a great responsibility to play a real person. For me, it was very important to do a lot of research, and I watched a lot of videos of Lally and read articles and interviews that she had done. And I did some vocal coaching for the role. Stephen had mentioned that we should change our voices a little, and Kay Graham certainly had a very specific way of speaking, and I think we wanted to approximate Lally and also just to sound like we were in the same family.
I jumped on Air Force One, spent the weekend.
I did not jump. You and Louis Pearson said I had to
speedboating
go.
with Lyndon and Ladybird.
Kay's in a position she never thought she'd be in. I was playing a real person, and there were only photographic images. Some of it had to be invented, and in that sense, it was very freeing because I didn't have to worry about matching a voice. I didn't have to worry about matching a physical cadence. And it is an enormous responsibility because, you know, this woman's got children and she's not alive anymore, but people who knew her are, and you never want people to think it's terrible or inaccurate, you know, but you do the best you can with what you have.
There's an article about me coming out in the Times tomorrow. It's not flattering. It's a tiny little moment in McNamara's life, and he was a huge, huge character.
We're here.
That's after the joke, right?
Exactly.
I can come to you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right after the joke, everybody.
He was a force of nature who could not make a decision. He would rather make a bad decision than wait and make no decision. And he ran afoul of that sort of mindset more than twice in his life. We felt that military pressure was the only thing that was going to drive Ho Chi Minh to the table. Our decision-making process was
flawed.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
David Cross and I had a TV show on HBO called Mr. Show, and then a show called With Bob and David. So it was a sketch comedy show, and there was no awareness when we were hired that we were a comedy duo. We didn't want to say anything at first. It was like, don't tell him, don't tell him. But Steven kept saying, Bob and David, you guys stand next to each other.
And it happened 4 times in a row, to the point where Bob and I would look at each other and go, does he know?
We weren't sure how he would feel about discovering that he'd cast this comedy team in his serious movie.
That was one of the first questions we asked when everything was kind of over and settled. And he said he didn't know about it, but then somebody told him about it. I think it might have been Tom Hanks. It was like, you know about Mr. Show? You know those guys did a whole thing together back in the day, So that was cool. But he was totally cool about it.
We know your reporters are talented, but the New York Times spent 3 months going over these documents.
I had worked with Zach Woods before. He actually played my ex-boyfriend in something, so then now in this we play partners. So I hung out with him quite a bit, but when you're waiting around, you're all just kind of there. So when you're surrounded by such talented people, then to top it all off, nice people that you want to sit in a room with all day. It just makes your job so easy.
If the public ever saw these papers, they would turn against the war.
Meeting Ellsberg was incredible. A big question I had for him was, during this time, had the largest FBI manhunt after him. I said, were you scared? And he said, no, I wasn't, because I had such conviction in what I was doing. And that to me was a real key into who he was.
They're gonna lock you up, Dan.
Wouldn't you go to prison to stop this war?
I do see you after, but a woman in charge, then you should keep talking.
Yeah, it's not like it's an easy sell. It's not
exactly right.
A local paper. Yeah.
Perfect.
The buyers are obviously skittish about having a woman in charge, and it's not like it's an easy sell. It's a local.
Arthur Parsons is one of the few people in this movie who did not exist in real life. He is a kind of amalgamation of several characters functioning as kind of an antagonist.
They think it's possible, likely even, that a number of the institutional investors will pull out if you choose to publish.
My character needs to be the strongest obstacle you can be in sort of avoiding mustache twirling. If I'm a dismissible jerk, it diminishes the heroicism of what Ben Bradley and what Kay Graham are doing. So that is my struggle as an actor.
Can you guarantee me that we could go to print without endangering any of our soldiers?
You can't be considering going.
I'm talking to Mr. Bradley now.
I live in New York, so I'm also always going to the theater, always looking for interesting people.
I get a lot of my cast from theater. A lot of Lincoln was cast right off the boards, as were many roles in the Post.
The company's selling how many shares?
Like Tracy Letts, the Pulitzer Prize-winning, Tony-winning author, playwright.
Steven took a lot of terrific theater actors, people who've worked in film as well, but people who have spent a lot of time on stages here in New York, and I had several old Chicago pals in this movie as well. And that's great fun for me. Some faces I've known for 30 years, some people were brand new to me, but there was really a sense from the earliest days that people were cheering for each other.
I didn't crash Julie's wedding.
What would you call it, Judith?
Well, I would call it deft reportage.
All right, come on, everybody.
This is my first movie, my first film. I still can't believe it. I feel like I got the golden ticket. I didn't know what to expect. It was just like a joyful place to be every day. Everybody was so glad to be there and to be a part of it.
To play someone who is a real person and who's living today and who will watch this movie, there is a great responsibility to that. So what I decided to do was pull his articles from when he was working in the paper the year that this takes place, because I wanted to understand his interests and the things he wrote about. It's important to me to make it as real as possible. So I took one of those articles that he wrote, I printed it out, and I transcribed it onto a notepad. And then I stuck that notepad on my desk, and there's a scene where I'm typing an article.
Everyone, listen up!
And instead of just typing nonsense, I'm typing an article that he really wrote that week. And that, to me, it just makes it all the more real.
We think editorial should run
I
something.
just heard somebody say they're working on that.
Well, if the White House is going to take a stance like that, don't you think we should plant a flag? The woman I play is named Meg Greenfield. She's at this time working on the editorial board at the Washington Post. And like Katharine Graham, she's one of the only women working in this capacity. in the United States. And so it's interesting for me because I play one of two women in this newsroom who, much like Katharine Graham, they don't fit in the boardroom with the boys, but they're also hierarchically have more authority than the secretaries. And there are no other women in the room otherwise. And so one of the things I love about this story that I discovered is that Meg Greenfield and Katharine Graham, of course, became very good friends, as you must have allies in situations like this. It's a real fish out of water story, ultimately.
If you're nervous and need distraction, I do happen to have a copy of today's Times.
Oh, Abe?
During my research on Abe, I had found one particular anecdote that he seemed to put across in all of his interviews. He says, you know what the power of the New York Times is that when anybody from Boston to Washington calls anybody else from Boston to Washington, the unspoken assumption of their conversation is that they both started the morning reading the New York Times. And I just thought it kind of encapsulated who he was, how he really was the Times at that time.
Must be a lot of people from Boston to Washington reading about us.
Yes, well, I suppose it's appropriate, given what's at stake.
Listen up! We've got a decision. We've got a decision.
There's a reason that all these people are here right now together making this movie in 2017. It has to do with the importance of the First Amendment and of having this discussion about the First Amendment.
The Founding Fathers gave the free press the protection it must have to fulfill its essential role in our democracy.
It's really essential. It's what makes us American. It defines us. And every single person that I know of who has participated in this process is here for that reason, first and foremost.
The press was to serve the governed, not the governors.